Hello, welcome to another edition of Sally's Astrology Book Club. Today I am beginning a discussion of the final book in the Elements series by Stephen Forrest, The Book of Water. This has been just equally amazing to delve through Stephen Forrest's wisdom about the signs of the zodiac and the planets and the houses. You know, in the Book of Fire, he talked about the purpose of the fire element is to connect us to that life force, that force that drives us to be, to explore, to create. The earth signs are to take that divine wisdom and bring it to earth in practical form. Air signs are here to help us increase our perception, to better understand the world so that we can individuate and think for ourselves. And then finally, the book of water, he tells us the water element is here to help us to heal. Life on earth, in every lifetime can be painful at certain times. We all have wounds that we carry. Stephen Forrest would even argue that we come to earth with certain wounds to be healed. He's a believer in reincarnation. And so he looks upon the water signs, planets, and houses. That would be Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces. The signs would be the moon, Mars and Pluto. And then also he uses Jupiter and Neptune as the Pisces planets. And then the houses 4, 8, and 12, he all considers to be places where we can experience healing. To start with Cancer, the simplest of the signs, he focuses on the Cancerian need to feel. If you're a Cancerian or have planets in Cancer and you sometimes feel guilty because you're so emotional and all over the place, it's really the job of the Cancer energy in our chart to feel, to really process something, to let it sink in. Because unless we can actually feel the feelings, we cannot begin the process of healing and moving forward. So this is the very first step in the water trio. And so also because it's very difficult to live life with such heightened sensitivity, Cancer tends to learn how to protect itself. That, we think about Cancer, the crab, very tender inside, but then that crusty shell on the outside. And so having that shell gives the Cancer a place where it feels safe and where it can grow. However, we know, of course, that as we grow, shells become too small for us. And that's part of the job of the Cancer too, to recognize when they need to, for example, leave home, leave a job, leave a relationship that is impeding their growth or in some way toxic to them. And so this process of continually shedding an old shell, creating a new shell in which one can create and grow is very much part of the Cancer journey as well. And it's interesting when we think of famous Cancerians, we do tend to think of them in relation to their emotional lives. I was thinking of Princess Diana, one of the most famous Cancer sons in the world. And also, you can think about the very dark emotions of O.J. Simpson. Actress Meryl Streep is a Cancer, and imagine all of the roles that she has played in which she can just emotionally dive into the substance of the character she's playing and never seems to be the same person in two different roles. And so always, that feeling life is front and center with the Cancer sun. And I was wanting to do the chart of Selena Gomez, because you think about her very much in terms of her feelings and her growth. But unfortunately, the chart we have for her is a C-rated chart, which means it's basically hearsay. And she was born on the day when the sun moved from Cancer to Leo. So we can't for sure say whether she's a Cancer or a Leo sun. So I looked to another chart of an actress, Selma Blair, who is a Cancer sun. And if you look at the chart, you can see that she's not only a Cancer sun, but Mercury, South Node, and Mars, all in the sign of Cancer. And so she's not a particularly, she hasn't had multiple roles like Meryl Streep, and she's not quite as much, on social media and in pop culture as Selena Gomez, but she did in 2022 write a memoir called Mean Baby, in which she talked about her life. And it was not really so much of her life as an actress, but her emotional life. So I thought she would be a good example for demonstrating how the Cancer energy can work in a life. In her memoir, she tells us that she immediately starts talking about different wounds she experienced. As a child, I think she had a rather challenging relationship with her mother. Her mother, for some reason, felt it incumbent upon herself to tell Selma when she was a very young child that her mother had considered aborting her and had changed her mind. But this was a story that she told Selma a number of times, which built a pain and insecurity within her. And so Selma writes that in those early childhood years and even into her teen years, she just was very much obsessed with getting her mother's approval. So that became a kind of shell. If only my mother could love me, I would be okay. Also during this time, when she was a young teenager, her mother told her that once her period started, she could not gain any weight after that. That was her weight for life. And so she, in that whole process of trying to please her mother, became anorexic and didn't even realize it until she went into treatment for alcohol dependency many years later. So she was living within this very confined, constrictive shell where she was constantly trying to get her mother's approval, constantly falling short. And it wasn't until she got older, started her own life, that she was able to break out of that shell of seeking her mother's approval, and knew that was up to her to create her own life and self-worth. However, she still had other problems to deal with. She had developed an alcohol dependency at a very young age. And so this became another shell that she lived life in. She was a young actress in Hollywood. She was on the party scene. She was, apparently, for all the world to see, was having a great time, but deeply she was in a very emotionally fragile state and was masking it by constantly partying and getting drunk. So she writes that about this time in her life when she eventually had to recognize that this shell was constricting her and that she needed to break out. And it wasn't really until she herself became a mother that she became very serious about entering into treatment and breaking her addiction to alcohol. And so we also see in her memoir, she talked about relationships becoming another shell that she would try to hide in, that she would be very obsessive about whomever she was dating. At one point, she saw the actor Jason Schwartzman in a movie and said, oh, that's my guy, that's my soulmate. I'm going to seek him out. And because of her position, was able to meet him, and they eventually dated for several years. But she was just so demanding and so obsessive in the relationship that he finally had to draw boundaries and say, I care about you, but I'm never going to see you again. And so she had to learn by having a relationship collapse on her to get out of that shell of depending on someone else to give her self-worth and to find her own joy within herself. So all these experiences then kind of carried her up to about the age of 40. But throughout most of her life, even as a child, she had been experiencing rather bizarre pains. In fact, she thinks a lot of her alcohol addiction had to do with self-medicating. And it wasn't until, through a series of circumstances, friends helping her out, finding the right doctor, that she got a diagnosis around the age of 40 that she had MS. And so that explained a lot of the pain physical pain that she'd been suffering throughout her life. And so with that diagnosis, she said she never took another drink again. Her focus became on managing her body, managing her health, so that she could be the best possible mother that she could be for her son, the best friend she could be to those who cared about her. And so she found finally a healthy shell to build and grow in, that she accepted that she had this physical disease, that she needed to manage it. And then eventually she discovered that she could, by telling her story, reach others who might not be as privileged as she was, and to reach out and to help them find ways to deal with their, to cope with their illness. And then also she started a foundation to Race to Erase MS, which is funding research and providing support. And so you can see her water journey so strong in her chart because she's got the 3 planets plus the South Node. So she had to learn to feel every feeling as she went through her life. But notice there's something else going on in her chart that's very watery, and that is that her Cancer planets and South Node are ruled by a Scorpio moon. And we'll learn next week when we talk about Scorpio in the chart. Scorpios are here not just to feel, but to confront and to be very honest about themselves, their experiences, taking responsibility where they need to, facing the fact that where they've been victimized. It's a very difficult process. And so we know from Selma's story that it took a number of times of going into rehab and going into therapy and learning to look at her life and what she had experienced, where her personal responsibility was, where there were others who had made life difficult for her. And so that confronting and being honest about herself, very much what she was doing in this memoir she wrote. But finally, there's something else in her chart that's very watery. Stephen Forrest describes the 12th house as a water house where we regenerate and heal. And the process here is not so much just feeling or confronting, but transcending, that realizing that we're part of something greater than ourselves. And it's once we learn to forgive that we can take this next step and become a person who is not feeling constantly victimized by life and pain and suffering all the time, that we can forgive it, that we can release it, and then we can use what we've experienced to help others. And so we can see that in Selma Blair's life, that she was able to finally, through therapy, through experience, able to forgive her mother. She was able to forgive herself for many of the mistakes that she had made. And after doing that, she could release this difficult past and move on to a future where she was living a life where she was showing up not just for herself, but for her son, for her friends, and for other people suffering with MS. And so the book ends in a very uplifting note that she had come through a lot of darkness, but had found her way into light. And this is the path of the water, planet, signs, and houses in our chart, according to Stephen Forrest. So thank you very much for joining me for this discussion of Selma Blair's chart. And I'll look forward to seeing you next time when we talk about Scorpio. Take care. Bye.